Thank you, Stephanie. I fall in love with ideas, always have. When I was very young, but old enough to be left home alone when my mother was at work, I decided to erect a lemonade stand outside the family home. I wanted to add a sweet twist to the traditional formula, so I walked the mile to the corner grocery store and purchased a bag of assorted penny candies. My menu was now serving ice-cold lemonade and 2-penny candy. I was taking 2 risks, borrowing money from my piggy bank and not asking my mother's permission. Of course, Mother found out fairly quickly about my entrepreneurial adventures, and my aspirations of becoming the queen of the pop-up candy shop were removed from my activity schedule. I am adamant in my belief that we must concoct many dreams for ourselves. Some dreams we will develop and realize quickly, while others might simmer on the back burner for years. And occasionally we will form an attachment with the dream for a while, but eventually we may lose heart and end up dumping it in the bin. The memories that I hold close, the strongest and happiest, are centered on food and books. My older brother and sister were close in age, competitive in nature, and very active in sports. I enjoyed reading my books. Our father left the family home when I was 3, which resulted in me spending a goodly amount of these early years with my grandparents, dividing my hours in their home between Granny's kitchen and my grandfather's beautiful vegetable garden. When I was satisfied with the knowledge Granddad imparted on me from that day's antics in the garden, I would lie in the warm grass under the transparent apple tree, allowing the clouds' artistic movements to determine the next dream. Often Granny would worry if I was spending too much time lying about, and she would call me from the back porch. I would move inside the house to observe her bustle about in her large kitchen. When mealtime drew close, I could sit in the nook with Grandfather as he read his books, waiting patiently for his meal, or move to his rocking chair when I wanted to be closer to the satisfying smells wafting from her simmering pots. These days I spent with my elders were quiet and thoughtful. They were not a loquacious couple, but I remember sensing a deep and gentle love for each other as they allowed themselves to grow old gracefully, sharing a meaningful and comfortable life. I long for those Sundays when all shops were closed, the dining room table was formally laid, and together the family shared a grand 1 p.m. dinner, quiet afternoons with gentle play or books, cold tea at 7 p.m. followed by projected slides produced by my uncle and grandfather. My mother's desire to feed her children 3 healthy and nourishing meals a day came naturally. She shopped daily, and there was always plenty of fresh fruit around for snacks, but she was not an inspired cook. My mother believed that over-fried liver once a week for breakfast was a must to ensure we had enough iron in our diet. I was not allowed to cook at home. Yes, Mother wanted me to spend my hours after school practicing the piano or completing my homework. The real issue for her was economics. She always felt I was one of the few people in the world who should have been born with a silver spoon in their mouth because my desires in all matters, particularly when I was preparing food, were too extravagant. When I left home at 18 years of age, I was determined to prove her wrong and show her that I was able to take care of myself, especially in the kitchen. I laugh now, remembering the first dinner I cooked for my boyfriend of the era. The roast beef was ready at 6 p.m., but the potatoes were cooked at 5 p.m., and the carrots and broccoli were perfect at 4 p.m. How this happened I would never figure out, but I was not discouraged, so I began to take cooking classes and to clip recipes from magazines and newspapers. When my mother observed my efforts to become proficient in the kitchen, she presented me with a beautiful French cookbook that included classical French preparations, table settings of the French aristocracy, and all the proper details deemed necessary for entertaining in the home. I was encouraged to take a job working for a company that sold seafood to restaurants. While working with this company, the lunch hour was a dismal interlude with regards to food. You could bring your lunch from home or wait for the bell of the catering truck that dispensed uninspired food to the surrounding businesses. When this bell would ring, you could often hear us recite in unison, "There's the garbage truck." We were a small group, so I suggested the lunchroom should have an oven. Then we could each take a day of the week and bring a prepared casserole to cook in the oven for us all to enjoy together. We had great fun with this, experimenting with our ideas, enjoying the recipes from the different cultures we represented. One woman from the Caribbean was very excited to introduce us to pig's feet. I left this fishy world intending to return to my studies. It was at this time I was approached by Umberto to come and work for him as he was opening a new restaurant, El Porto, in Gastown. I worked for Umberto for 5 years, not making a lot of money, but I fell in love with the way Italians embraced their food and the importance of eating together when the work was done, no matter what had happened earlier in the day or how angry you had been with one another, because in the end, you shared your meal, healed your wounds, and carried on, well-nourished. From there I moved along, working in the hotel business for a few years, attending culinary school to learn the basics of French classical cuisine, eventually tossing my shingle into the sky, letting it bounce about in ventures involving catering, designing unique events, and starting my own restaurant, Barbara Joe's Elegant Home Cooking. The idea for my restaurant came from reading novels and cookery books about the southern regions of the southeast United States. My rainforest spirit would be transported to a softer climate. As the words drawled slowly off the pages into my psyche, I embraced the idea of celebrating genteel manners in a culture whose greatest delight appeared to be sharing moments of intense pleasure around the table, dedicating the majority of one's leisure days to cooking, eating, and drinking. And when I say drinking, I refer to the cool cucumber water, the lemonade served to the ladies with a sipping spoon, and for those who understood they could elegantly enjoy a stronger elixir, a bourbon mint julep. I wanted the restaurant to represent all that I loved from the experience and memories I had tucked away. I had traveled well, always observing the nuance of different cultures, style, and service. My love for jazz and blues determined the background music. My chef was in tune with local suppliers for organic produce. In the summer, we had a different homemade pie every day with the appropriate homemade ice cream. To this day, I believe I can make the best mint julep, bourbon Manhattan, and gin martini ever. The restaurant was a gem, an extension of my home dining room, and as lovely as that may sound, it was a mistake. I embraced this genteel idea too close, and it was not a good formula for paying the bills. When the lease was up for renewal, just over 3 years after I opened the doors, I knew it was time to let my head take over my heart and say goodbye to this dream. This was the happiest day of my mother's life. Closing the restaurant was difficult, but after a few years of contract work, my mornings subsided. And one gray Vancouver afternoon, I sat in my cozy chair with a cup of tea and tucked into a favorite food magazine and read a small item about a cookbook shop in London, England that had a kitchen in it. I put the magazine down, stood up and stated, "This is it. My new dream has arrived." I walked over to my computer and started to write a business plan. And here I am, 13 years later, fully ensconced in the world of cookbooks, meeting and becoming friends with chefs and authors around the world. We host cooking events with these chefs and authors who contribute incredibly to fulfilling my dream of educating our community about the pleasures of eating well and cooking for family, friends, for yourself. It is often said that food heals the soul. I believe my joy stems from a career that celebrates both real food and real books that teach us about real food. I also believe my joy is achieved from serving the people as well as I can and sending them home satisfied with the knowledge that food and books matter and will always bring us together. I opened the shop on September 7th, 1997. My mother was finally delighted, perhaps because I began to add my own books to the shelves. In 1998, I published my first cookbook with Raincoast Books, Tin Fish Gourmet. In 2003, I published my second book with Douglas and McIntosh, Great Chefs Cook at Barbara Joe's, which is a collection of short stories about a number of the wonderful chefs and authors that have visited the shop. And on June 17th, 2010, I took my greatest life risk to date. I self-published a small book, Cooking for Me, and Sometimes You, a Parisian romance with recipes. This experience appears to be moving my life along into an interesting direction. But like any new chapter in life, that's another story.